Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and today I wanted to have a conversation about something that I think is so important to all of us, which is black males in the criminal justice system. And there's a scholar by the name of Dr. Chanelle Jones, who is sitting right next to me if you're looking at your screen. And Dr. Jones is a professor of criminology and criminal justice at Ohio Dominican University. And I thought about talking to Dr. Jones because as you might have seen just a couple days ago, or yesterday actually, I did a couple of appearances on CNN and Democracy Now! About the Jordan Davis case where the teenager was killed for playing his music too loud, and also the case of the Ethan Couch, the affluenza kid who didn't get any time in prison after he killed 4 people. So I wanted to hear from a criminologist, and so I reached out to Dr. Jones, and she was gracious enough to give us her time. How are you doing today, Dr. Jones? Welcome to Your Black World.
Thank you. I'm good. How are you?
Doing very well, very well. It's really cold in Chicago. It's like I think we got 1 degree today. They just gave us 1. And what's the weather like in Ohio?
Oh, we're about the same. I think we had some sub-zero weather today. It's freezing out. Yeah. Yeah. And it's supposed to snow, I believe, tomorrow or tonight. We're supposed to get some more snow. So yeah, our weather's just as bad.
This weather is horrible. It's insane. It's crazy. I called you Dr. Jones because, when I don't feel like I can totally understand, certain things, I call people, that I think have a deeper understanding than I do. And I respect you a great deal as a criminologist. And, I was thinking about the Jordan Davis case. We can start there. Okay, here you have an example of a teenager. He was 17 years old, and he was with his friends, and they were playing their music, and they get confronted by Michael Dunn, a white guy, 47 years old, who runs up and asks them to turn the music down. They turn the music off, and then they turn it back on, and then they get into a yelling match. Dunn pulls out his gun, unloads 9 bullets onto an SUV full of kids, kills Jordan Davis, drives away. He's gone for 200 miles. It takes 2 days before he turns himself in. And people are wondering who the bad guy was. I don't understand that. I mean, I have to admit, when I talk about this case, I can't help but almost getting angry about it. And so I want to know, just, you as a criminologist, I mean, what do you think, first of all, what's your first thought when you heard about the Jordan Davis case, and kind of what was your reaction as a person who kind of understands the criminal justice system and how it works?
Well, the first thing that I thought about was, here we go again, this assumption of black male criminality, this assumption that the young black man or the guys that were in the car, that they, facilitated this and for some reason had a gun. And it struck me when I noticed, I think in the story, because you missed a piece there, that he actually went home and had a pizza and did not contact the cops. I thought that was just crazy. But then, when I started to really think about this within a criminal justice perspective, I started to think about, okay, well, here we go again. We have this automatic assumption that's usually tied to black men that would assume that they're up to no good, that they're criminal, that they're deviants. Pair that with the issue of white supremacy and a little bit of race discrimination and these biases, and that all facilitated this incident that occurred. It's a very unfortunate situation that did occur. And when we look at theories that try to explain how this would happen or why somebody would think about this, you automatically go to this notion of one, implicit bias. And the implicit bias, there are these ideas of that we have, these preconceived notions that we make about different groups, and that we operate off of those assumptions. They operate on a subconscious level. Oftentimes when we think, hey, nobody wants to say I'm outwardly a racist or I outwardly discriminate, but on a subconscious level, we have what we call implicit biases, where people don't necessarily recognize it, but they operate off of those biases. And there have been several studies that support the notion of the existence of an implicit bias. So, I think all of that played a factor into this case. And one of the other things that I noticed too was, I think they're going to suppress some of the evidence with the trial, but he actually wrote several letters. Michael Dunn did. He wrote several letters from prison, calling these kids thugs and kind of alluding to the fact that he may be prejudiced and may be racist. And so, I think he automatically just assumed these are disposable black men. It's not going to matter if I shoot and kill them or not. I'm going to get away with it because I am a white man. And so now here we are at the trial. And I think it's going to be interesting with the outcome. And again, this is in Florida, Jacksonville. We're dealing with Angela Corey all over again. And so, we're keeping a close eye on this case because it's just terrible how situations like this happen.
It's a mess, and as you were talking, I was furiously taking notes because I learned so much when you explain the criminal justice system from your perspective. And I guess it's really ironic. I think, unlike a lot of the individuals that I spend time with, like for example, when I worked directly with Al Sharpton a lot, one of the areas where we differed a little bit is that I don't think that every police officer is bad. I don't think that every criminal justice person is necessarily bad. I think that we have bad cops, we have good cops, we have people that are in the system that know the system that want to make the system better, and then we have people that maybe manipulate the system and are corrupt. And I think that one of the most healthy ways that black men and black people can look at the criminal justice system is to kind of say, okay, maybe there is some hope sometimes that there are people there that want to do the right thing. But of course, at the same time, we have to speak loudly about the fact that our system isn't always wired to do the right thing, right? I don't think that in this situation that things are leaning in Jordan Davis's favor. And what's incredibly problematic here to me is that it seems that, when you have this scenario, it's unlike any other scenario that could exist in any other state of the universe. And what I mean by that is, if I, as a 42-year-old black man, shot up in a car full of unarmed white teenagers and then left the scene and drove 200 miles, ate pizza on the way, and hung out with my lady friend, and then went to go see the cops a couple of days later after they figured out that it was me, not before, because remember they found his house, and then he was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm turning myself in." Right? I just really don't think that I would get the same benefit of the doubt. I don't think it would be as easy for me to say, that thug he scared me, and even though he didn't have a weapon, I saw something that looked like a gun, so I just started firing. I didn't just fire once to get away. I was ready to kill everybody up in that mug. It sounds crazy, right? Even my own family would say, "No, dude, you are a killer." So I don't understand why we somehow, because we have this fear of the black male, because we have this belief that black male life is just not as worthy as white life, because we want to believe Jordan Davis did something wrong. It's amazing that the bar is set so low that it says that if Jordan Davis did anything to even defend himself, that somehow the victim has become the perpetrator, right? So, for example, in the case, they were talking about whether or not he opened his door to get out to confront Dunn. So what if he did? What if, if you're cussing at somebody, you're having a yelling match, what if somebody gets out, opens the door? What if he opened the door, walked up in Dunn's face, called him a motherfucking, did all this stuff, excuse my French, does that mean that he deserved to be shot? That's what I don't understand.
No, it doesn't mean that he should have been shot. And at the end of the day, let's think about this. Michael Dunn was in a car. All he had to do was press the accelerator and drive off. That's all he had to do. But no, he chose to stand there. He chose to draw out his gun, and he chose to engage and shoot. And he shot him. I think he shot the car like 8 times. So automatically, there's a lot of things that go wrong with this. Yes, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, sorry. I had the mic off, but I was saying it was 9 times. It was 50 Cent.
Oh, it was 9.
Yeah, remember his truck is like 50 Cent. Remember 50 Cent, the rapper? I got shot 9 times. But go ahead, please keep going.
All right, so it's 9 times that he shot this truck. But but let's think about this though. In the case, the defense attorney, Michael Dunn's attorney, he has asked that the prosecution and everybody else involved in the case not refer to Jordan Davis as the victim. And so, it's the way that they're going about this case, the terminology that they're using, they're already trying to structure it in such a way that we don't look at Jordan Davis as the victim, that they look at him as a possible offender, as one that facilitated this event and that caused his own demise, which we know probably is not the case. I mean, he was unarmed. And so when you look at just how this trial is taking place, who all, what they're doing, they're trying to keep evidence, they don't want to admit the letters that he wrote from prison. They don't want to refer to Jordan Davis as a victim. All of these taken into consideration, they're structuring this and they're trying to frame the jury's mindset into thinking that this young man was actually going to attack Michael Dunn, which just was not the case. And so it is very, very unfortunate. But when we look at the long history of blacks in the criminal justice system and even the racial hierarchy that we have within American society as it is, automatically there's that idea that blacks are disposable. And we see that several times over with the criminal justice system and how these cases are played out. It's very unfortunate.
Well, I was, as you were talking, I was looking on my other computer and I was looking up some of what Michael Dunn said, to his relatives in these letters that he wrote from jail. Mm-hmm. And in one letter, and I'll give a quote here, and it's very interesting. At first, it doesn't sound as bad as it sounds, but then I thought about it and read it again. I said, okay, even that first sentence is actually worse than what it appears to be. The sentence here, here's what it says. It says, and this is the letter he wrote to his grandmother, it looks like. It says, "It's spooky how racist everyone is up here and how biased toward blacks the courts are." So on one hand, I'm thinking, wait, he's complaining that whites are racist toward blacks, the court system is racist toward blacks. But actually, I think he's saying that the court it actually works in favor of African Americans. Let me tell you why I think that. He says, "The jail is full of blacks and they all act like thugs." And then he says, "This may sound a bit radical, but if more people would arm themselves and kill these, blank idiots, I guess maybe it's effing idiots, when they're threatening, when they're threatening you, eventually they may take the hint and change their behavior." And so in a letter to his girlfriend, he's talking about moving out west, and he says, he claims he has truth and law on his side. At least that's what he tells his girlfriend. But I imagine a lot of guys, when they get locked up, they tell their girlfriend the story that they want them to hear. I doubt if he would say, "Hey, sweetie, I'm a cold killer and I shot somebody just for the hell of it." And so, it's interesting, I guess, because on one hand, when you analyze this trial, you're looking at the racism of Dunn himself and what led him to behave this way, what led him to react the way that he did, which is very, very real. But then you have the racism of the justice system itself, which, I would argue is a place where the easiest way to be exonerated for a crime is to kill a black male. I really believe that. I'm sure maybe there are studies out there that show that. I think it's the race of the victim that matters more than the race of the victim.
Yeah. Yes, that is correct. It is the race of the victim that matters. How the offender, whether or not he would get off or exonerated or be sentenced to prison. And Darnell Hopkins, I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work. He's done a lot of research on the racial hierarchy of seriousness of homicide offenses. And so what he looks at is the offender-victim relationship. So the most serious offenses that are prosecuted the most are typically when there is a black offender and a white victim. The least serious offenses are when there is a black offender and a black victim. Again, that goes into that whole disposable black male idea. And so, a lot of research has been done to support this notion. And we see that again. So you have Michael Dunn, he has these ideas about these black kids, and we see he still has them, obviously, from the letters that he's writing in jail or prison. And he he functioned off of those negative beliefs and those perceptions that he had about black people. And so, he probably saw those kids and literally thought, here are a bunch of, black kids that have their loud music. They're quote unquote thugs. I'm sick of that term too. But, it's with their thugs. I can just shoot them and let me just go on and drive off and nobody will even think, or miss them, And so that is very problematic when we have people operating and thinking that way, because we just know, black men are of value to our society. So it is very unfortunate.
Well, I agree with you 100%. And, and I'll say this in my closing thought about the case with Michael Dunn. I think that this, in my gut tells me that this was road rage in a gas station. That basically he said, you're not going to talk to me that way. He went into his car, pulled out his gun, shot everything up, thought he was going to get away with it because he didn't think anybody was watching or would, know it was him. He was from out of town too, so maybe he thought if I just drive away and leave town, then I can just put this behind me. So you never know. The other thing is you don't know. I mean, I don't know if they are able to do the toxicology test from that moment, but there's a possibility he could have been on drugs or maybe drunk or something like that because he had just come back from a party and he's with his lady. There's no telling what they're into. You don't know, right?
You don't know. It's true.
Right. We don't know. We don't know, but I believe it was road rage at a gas station. And the other point I'll make on that is, I remember 2 years ago, there was a case, maybe 3 years ago, a case that broke my heart, the case of Amy Michael down in Atlanta. Amy Michael was a 23-year-old college student who caused a car accident. She was driving, she swerved in the other lane, caused another car to swerve. A bunch of cars hit each other. It was on Easter Sunday, I think in 2009. There was an explosion. I want to say 5 people got killed on the way to church, including a couple little kids. Amy was driving. Amy hit somebody, but she wasn't in the accident, but she did cause it. And what she didn't do was she didn't stop to go back to check to see if the people were okay. She saw the fireball and she got scared. She went home. She told her mother. Her mother said, don't tell anybody because you'll go to jail. So her mother got the car fixed. And I guess her mother's logic was, well, telling somebody that you were in, part of the accident isn't going to bring those people back. Again, I'm not saying that it was right. It wasn't. But I think I know a lot of parents who might have done the same thing, because she's a college student. Maybe she didn't want her daughter to go to prison at all, which again is wrong. She should have told the police, but she didn't. So she got the car fixed. Eventually the authorities found out that Amy was involved in the accident. And when they found out, they gave Amy Michael, this 23-year-old college student, no criminal record from what I understand. They gave her 40 years in prison. And they gave her mother 8 years in prison. And the reason the judge gave her the sentence was not because of the accident, because that was an accident. Any of us could have done that part. It was because she was involved in the hit and run. She didn't turn herself in. She drove away and came back in after they found out who she was. So if you can get 40 years in prison for a hit and run, which I still think that was an excessive sentence, they gave her mother 8 years. If you get 40 years for a hit and run, then what do you get for a kill and run? When you shot up a truck full of kids and you drove away for 200 miles, didn't turn yourself in until the cops figured out who you were, that right there, in my opinion, should warrant at least 5 or 10 years in prison, even without the fact that he shot those other people. So this case is ridiculous, and it is sad that we have to work so hard to just get the basics of justice. And maybe what we're dealing with is the fact that we do live in a country, where 30, 40 years ago, Michael Dunn wouldn't have gotten prosecuted. They would have let him go. They had Klan members that were part of the police department in Florida back in those days. So now, and this wasn't that long ago. This is like when our parents were kids, so it's not like that far removed from where we are now. And the last story I want to tell you, Dr. Jones, I want to get your take on this, and then I'm going to let you get the last word.
All right.
I had a homeboy. He was my best friend. His name was Greg Wilkins. And I talk about him in the past tense because he died when we were 25. He got killed right before Tupac died. And Greg was a good guy. He was just like me. I like to think I'm a good guy. I don't know. But anyway, Greg was a good guy and one of my best friends. He had a daughter, and he took care of his daughter. And there was something that happened. I know he had his girlfriend's brother was a drug dealer, and somehow for some reason, drug dealers broke into his house because his brother-in-law or his girlfriend's brother was staying there. And so as a result, they shot my friend in the head right in front of his daughter, and he died. And I remember when he died that the media barely covered his death. They put it in the bottom of the newspaper. They didn't mention it at all, except maybe one day. I guess because they assumed if he's a black male who dies in a black neighborhood, he must have done something to deserve to die. That same day, a white woman got killed on her way to her job at the bank. And she was from the suburbs. She had a husband and 2 kids. And when she got killed, it was like the biggest tragedy our city had ever seen, Louisville, Kentucky. It was like they had candlelight vigils, a $25,000 reward. They talked about it every single day in the news. They were going to find the perpetrators no matter what. The police were holding press conferences, and that just broke my heart as a young man, because I was like, wait a minute, my friend was a good man, probably as good of a person as this other person who got killed. His daughter loved him the way her kids loved her. Well, why is it that we somehow think that black men are animals? That, the death of a black male is either something that we're just conditioned to accept, or just something that just doesn't matter, or maybe something that some people, I really believe, actually think society is better off when certain young black men are dead. And this just hurt me. This hurt me to the core. So I don't even know how that leads into a question exactly. So I'm putting you in a real awkward position here by saying all this stuff and not really asking a question. But, I just want to get your take, based on what I've just kind of said here. As a criminologist, what kind of guides you in terms of understanding how this applies to your people? And you do love your people, and that's why I respect you. You're not just a scholar, you're a warrior scholar, and that's what we need. We need black academic warriors who take their expertise back to the community, and that's what I respect. So I'll let you get the last word. Please tell me what you think, Dr. Jones.
Well, that's a lot that I have to give my opinion on. All right, so we'll back this all the way up. So when you talk about the black and run, I think you made a comment about, what's the sense for a hit and kill. I think that's what you said, a hit and kill or something like that, or killing. I forget how you said it. All right, but one of the interesting things that I found
I want to turn my mic back on. For so people can know this. So I want people to know, they already know this, but I have to remind them, we use janky ghetto technology. Like, we use Ubu and the free stuff. We're not a big front for a big corporation. We truly are independent. But it was kill and run. That was the term I made. And it's my turn.
That's what it was. All right. I wanted to make sure I got that right. Okay, so you said the kill and run. What's the going sentence for that? Well, one of the main things that we first need to point out here is the prosecution is not going for a death sentence. They're not seeking the death penalty out. So, with this case, and, I'm not an advocate for the death penalty, but I think automatically right there, that's telling that, they consider the loss of his life not as valuable as, per se, the loss of a white person's life. So there's one of the issues right there. And then, I think you got into the issue of somebody being killed and, the news really not covering. Well, I started to take that and compare that to this issue with this quote unquote new heroin epidemic that is, been going on with the death of the actor. And so I found that very interesting, because I'm like, prior to, his sudden over his drug abuse and his overdose that he had, and it was all over the news, rarely did we knew people were still abusing drugs, abusing heroin, and ODing on it, but no news coverage, no media coverage. But all of a sudden, it's like, oh my gosh, we had this heroin epidemic, because it was a white man who overdosed. And so, that's typically what we get. Because I'm like, we weren't talking about the prostitute who OD'd on heroin and, lost her life. Nobody is mentioning that and saying, oh, we had a problem like that. It wasn't even getting news coverage. But then all of a sudden, when this famous actor does it, oh, we have a problem. And that, again, ties into how we perceive different racial groups in our society. And, there's this notion of marginalized groups, of blacks, being just devalued in society, and that resonates throughout the criminal justice system. And it will not change until, I always believe it won't change until we get actually, we start to change the mindsets of people who were there, and then we change the composition of the criminal justice system. Right now the criminal justice system is predominantly controlled by Caucasians who just can't speak to the lived experiences of African Americans. And, I think we do need more blacks in policing professions, in criminal justice professions as attorneys. We have a lot, but until we get more in those positions, I really think it's going to be difficult to change. And then you just look at the structural composition of our society as well, and you have a group, when you have certain groups who are dominant groups and who are in power, they operate and they act and they do things to make sure that they stay in those positions of power. And that goes into these racial threats and these social threat theories that say once you have another group, you have the dominant group operating in a way to suppress the other groups, the lower groups would say. And so they don't pose a threat to that position that the dominant group is in. And they do that by these modes of control, which is through the criminal justice system, through these selective enforcement of rules and laws and whatnot. And then that's where you start to get into your whole racial profiling of these cases. And, one of the things that I did not see, I was trying to look and figure out, was the composition of the jury, because I'm quite interested to see. I believe it's going to be a sequestered jury, so I really couldn't find any information on, what does that jury look like. But I would guarantee that.
Let me help you with that. Let me help you. I think that the jury is all white. I got to double check, but if I'm not mistaken, I think.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah, but please continue.
Okay, so, then we have an all-white jury. Here we go again. But I would be interested to see how they rule on this because, again, and I don't want to talk too much because I can probably do an entire series on implicit bias. But I'll give you one study. William Cunningham in 2004 did a study on implicit biases. That means these unconscious, subconscious thoughts that different racial groups have towards the other. And what he did was he flashed these pictures of different racial groups and had people associate a positive or negative connotation with them. And when he flashed the pictures of the African American males to the white respondents, it triggered brain activity in the amygdala. And if anybody knows about the amygdala, that is where your responses to fear, to anger, anxiety, all of that is housed in the amygdala. And so what this implicit bias did was show a strong positive correlation between the black face and the activity in the amygdala among the white respondents. And so even though people implicitly responded that way, explicitly they said otherwise. So they respond, no, I'm not racist. No, I like everybody. I don't discriminate. But when that implicit bias test came in, there was a strong positive correlation between the negative perceptions and the black face among the white respondents. And so there have been other studies done. Phelps did one in 95. He did another one in 2005. Cunningham built upon several of his studies. And so this notion that, hey, somewhere along the lines, throughout history, we've come to associate blacks with criminality, and that association has transcended time. And so, and then it's reinforced by these images on the news, by the media and whatnot. So we have to come to a place where we begin to break down those ideologies, those preconceived notions and conceptions, and just reframe the thinking, not just of white Americans, but everybody. And until that's done, then we're going to continue to have these problems where you have African Americans who, they could be just at the gas station, listening to music, but automatically you have somebody drive up, oh my gosh, I'm scared, let me just open fire on them. And so that's where we get the problem. And until everybody's able to come to that recognition that, hey, we all have some implicit biases to some extent, be that against race, gender, sexuality, economic class, like it's there. And so everybody needs to come into terms with that. And then we'll be able to address some of these more explicit issues of racism and discrimination that is ingrained in our society. So those would be my final on that.
Well, your final thoughts are better than Jerry Springer's. He used to have a final thought, but it was always stupid. Your final thought actually is helpful to people, and that's and I think that gives people a chance to see why I called you on this, because you know the research. I mean, I was absolutely fascinated by what you said about I always called it the amygdala. Is that how you pronounce it? Amygdala?
The amygdala.
Amygdala. Yeah. So I'm going to go with your pronunciation, but that's fascinating. And what that kind of says to me is that, racism is not always a choice, right? It's just sometimes racial attitudes are almost, you can almost describe them, in some cases almost like a mental illness in a way. It's something that kind of, that where it's there and you may be in denial, but, maybe if someone planted that in you as a child, it's going to be there for life and there's not much you can do about it. And it's very interesting. Well, I want to say thank you so much for giving us your time and your expertise, Dr. Jones. I am so appreciative.
Oh, you're very welcome. This was fun. I appreciate you inviting me on. So we have to do this again.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much more in that brain that I want people to hear. And once again, I think people should check out Dr. Chanelle Jones because she represents the future in terms of what Black scholars can and should be. And Black scholars were not meant to sit off in our offices writing research papers that nobody's ever going to read. Sure, that's part of the job, and you should certainly do that. But after that, take some of that expertise, give it to the people you love, because the community needs you. And if we pull together our resources and really concentrate that, I think that we can be effectively unstoppable. So thank you very much, Dr. Jones, for doing what you do and being who you are.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Right.
Absolutely. And thank you all for checking us out at Your Black World. And I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins, and I so appreciate all of you. Without you, we are nothing. So until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.